lesson for August the 8th is entitled Putting Wisdom into Practice. The key verse is from Proverbs 25, verse 11, which says, "Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a ruling rightly given." The scriptures from Proverbs 25, verses 9 through 25, and verse 28. The lesson focus: put wisdom into practice through speech, manner, and action. In the overview, it says that Proverbs 25 begins a series of even more Proverbs of Solomon that owes its inclusion in the Hebrew Bible to the scribes of the reforming king Hezekiah. These teachings were undoubtedly important for instructing Israel in a way of life that is pleasing to God, even at a time when serving other gods was so tempting. We need this philosophy for living now as much as it was needed then. In the introduction, it says that many have noticed that the ethical teaching of Jesus seemed to flow right out of the wisdom tradition of Israel, and especially the Proverbs. One could imagine Jesus' parents instructing him in the way of the righteousness with the worldview depicted in those pithy statements. When Jesus grew to adulthood, his language, vocabulary, and metaphors for living seemed to have come right out of this literature. The Proverbs were far more than nice ideas. They made sense of the world from the underlying principles God the Creator had placed in the creation. We in the church today might ask ourselves what logic lies behind our activity. In fact, our actions might often stand counter to what we say we believe or think about our own Christian confession. Can you think of practices within the church that show in concrete form what we say we believe? Can you think of some that may contradict our words? In part 1, it says, "What you think and say matters." And the text is from Proverbs 25, verses 9 through 15, which says, "If you take your neighbor to court, do not betray another's confidence, or the one who hears it may shame you, and the charge against you will stand. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a ruling rightly given. Like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. Like a snow-cooled drink at harvest time is a trustworthy messenger to the one who sends him. He refreshes the spirit of his master. Like clouds and wind without rain is one who boasts of gifts never given. Through patience a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone." The wisdom of God has been conveyed and understood through words and ideas. It was through the spoken word of God that all things came into being, and it is through that divine logic that everything is sustained. We come to discover through the prelude of the Gospel of John that Jesus, as the incarnate Word, is likened to that same cosmic rationale. We shouldn't be surprised, then, how important words and propositions are when it comes to living rightly in the Word. Sometimes being wise can be as simple as sounding wise. In an earlier proverb we read, "Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent." Godly people should be slow to speak, but when they do speak, their words will confirm their quality of heart and mind. Through deliberate words and reasoning, we are able to bring peace to our world. But it is also true that while taking a neighbor to court, we should watch that we do not betray another's confidence. Our words have the power to heal and to destroy. They have the potential of bringing shame on us. One can see why the Proverbs describe wise speech as being as valuable as gold, silver, and costly jewelry. Though it is true that all talk and no action can be detrimental to faith and community, so can action without a proper time of reflection and discourse. The wise person knows that through patience a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. Breaking bones seems to be the quick approach to persuading individuals, groups, even nations, but it rarely accomplishes the desired outcome of reconciliation and peace. This kind of message is as refreshing as a snow-cooled drink. Action that is not preceded by a thoughtful and deliberate application of God-honoring wisdom is quite often violent, manipulative, and at best, a pragmatic attempt to get something done. These early verses emphasize the power and place of words and speech in our lives, but we are already beginning to hear the distant rumble of wisdom's true role as the shaper of our actions. Ultimately, people who brag about what they can do without doing it are like clouds and wind without rain. We will be reminded then in the following verses that it is not enough to speak a word, but one must speak a word rightly. In part 2, it says that the manner in which we speak is just as important as what we say, and the text is from Proverbs 25, verses 16 through 20, which says, "If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, too much of you, and they will hate you. Like a club or a sword or a sharp arrow is one who gives false testimony against a neighbor. Like a broken tooth or a lame foot is reliance on the unfaithful in a time of trouble. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart." Have you ever been right about something, but ruined it by making your point in the wrong way? Christians were described in their earliest beginnings as those who belong to the way. These followers of the Rabbi Jesus were shaped by his teachings and lived them out in a recognizable lifestyle. But what does such a life look like? Moderation, even satisfaction, is an important qualification for living a wise life. Anyone who has said, "If one is good, then 100 is better," and applied that logic to the eating of chicken wings would soon discover the suffering that results from that choice. When you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. The just enough amount is that which brings about the most beneficial experience without devolving into a selfish, addictive compulsion. Mark Twain is credited with saying, "The perfection of wisdom is to proportion our wants to our possessions, our ambitions to our capabilities, and we will then be a happy and a virtuous people." Besides a personal ethic, we must also develop proper social bearings. Living with one's neighbors can be a difficult thing. Not only do we need to learn the right amount of time we should spend in our social connections, but we also need to learn how to build up and support them. You may as well be taking a club to your neighbor's car if your words are against them and not for them. Being a neighbor, the question Jesus addressed in the parable of the Good Samaritan, is an important part of the new reign of God. Many can identify with going through a difficult time and being unable to form any positive outlook on life. This lot can fall on anyone through various life experiences and result in mental and emotional struggles such as depression and grief. On those occasions, it seems someone always comes along and sings songs to your heavy heart, trying to make you stop being sad. This well-meaning encourager can seem like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on a wound. It's not that a joyful experience isn't desired or even right. It's that the context warrants a different course of help and instruction. We must be careful here not to give the impression that the message is somehow less important than the manner of its delivery. The communication of the gospel is far more than eloquent speech or dramatic entertainment. The superiority of the wisdom of God is assumed, but it includes the package that delivers it. Wise words eventually must be put into action, and action has its desired responses. In part 3, it says correct living and right practice are symptoms of wise counsel and insight. And the text is from Proverbs 25, verses 21 through 25, and verse 28, which says, "If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Like a north wind that brings unexpected rain is a sly tongue, which provokes a horrified look. Better to live on a corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control." The ultimate end of biblical wisdom is not that one would be considered smart, brilliant, or even wise. Wisdom is a way of life that produces life. Living by God's commands will lead to peace in the home and in the world where the rubber meets the road. When our thoughts are in tune with the mind of God, sometimes our actions will run counter to the logic of the world. Why would we provide food and drink for a hungry enemy if we did not believe God's law would reward this way of life? Paul quoted this very proverb to support why Christians must not repay anyone evil for evil. He saw the answer to this question as tied to our belief that God alone will repay evil with his own holy wrath. Our actions are meant to reflect our acknowledgement of God's ultimate control. In some cases, it would be better just to stay away from quarrelsome people than to try to engage them in a sensible way. Our selected texts from Proverbs 25 end with an urbanized global outlook. When the Christian community, nourished by God's wisdom, greets sojourners from distant lands among us, it is like giving a cup of cold water to a weary soul. These verses seem to merge the actions of giving drink and speaking a word, so that both are seen as quenching the other's thirst. Verse 28 looks at the negative side of that engagement by comparing a city with broken walls to a person who doesn't have control over his or her life's practice and behavior. Because such people spend their energies, work, and passions without purpose, their weakened, tired state leaves them vulnerable to destruction. In today's life application, it says, in any learning setting, and especially in the church, we find people quickly dividing themselves along the lines of the thinkers and the doers. Our Western culture has contributed to this divide by creating educational systems that are sometimes cloistered from the very world they wish to impact. At the same time, how-to books flood the Christian marketplace for those eager for some new technique to do Christian ministry and discipleship. Ivory tower dwellers are accused of seeking wisdom for its own sake, and business entrepreneurs for the mere pragmatic expediency, with neither helping the church's mission. The Hebrew world of the Proverbs never would understand such a dichotomy. Thought and action, theology and ethics, even faith and works, are always seen in a holistic way. It is tempting to value one of these groups over the other. Some like to analyze and talk about things forever, often criticizing the people doing the work because of their lack of concern for reflection and substance. The doers often feel like Martha working in the kitchen while everyone else is having fun. They commend themselves on how much they do and how much they have accomplished. Seek to discover ways your church can meld these activities into an innovative and creative force for God. The church needs more thinker-doers.